Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Work is Rigged, the show where we talk all about what it's actually like to be neurodivergent in the workplace. Now today, we're going to be continuing our conversation with Kirby, the ADHD professional coach and somatic practitioner behind Kirby NeuroCo LLC. They specialize in helping other professionals recognize burnout in their body and set boundaries aligned with their nervous systems. As a trauma-informed coach and somatic healing practitioner, they have a lot of experience in the academic world, working a 9-to-5, and navigating the ins and outs of higher learning. We've got a lot to cover in this episode, so let's jump in. When I first started my career coaching business, it was because I realized that career advice doesn't make any sense. There was this one time where I was writing blogs and articles and stuff like that about how to get a new job, best practices in job hunting and getting hired and all that kind of stuff. And I was just like, I would never do any of this. I would get in so much trouble. I've really found that navigating the world of work and by extension, the world of adulthood as a neurodivergent person is very much trial and error. Let's face it, the reason that they don't want us to express ourselves and say it as it is. It's not because it's not helpful, but it is harder to manage. It is harder to control. It is harder to anticipate than if everybody just kind of followed the same script and behaved the same way. Most people have not done enough thinking to realize that that is one of the reasons why they are so adverse to people who are different, who operate differently, who bring new perspectives, because it threatens what they know and what they're comfortable in, which is interesting because we feel the same way when our sense of what we know and what we're comfortable with is threatened. We also get dysregulated and we freak out. But the problem is that the burden is on us as the different ones to accommodate and overcome and satisfy the expectations of the majority. God, what would it be like if the people who were in charge of managing people at work were actually required to know how to articulate these kinds of things, to be able to just name what is happening? That would be a game changer. The first time I ever had a manager that actually took care of me, it was life-changing for me. Even though she didn't know anything about neurodivergence, she was open to listening to what I needed. And on the days where I would get super overwhelmed with my workload, I didn't know what to do first. I was in decision paralysis, basically. I would just message her on our chat and I would say, do you have 5 minutes? These are the things I think need to be priority. What do you think? And so this would do two things. One, it would help me figure out what her expectations were. So I knew whatever I did next, I had a lower chance of messing things up or making things more complicated for her, because I always brought a list and I always led the conversation. So she never felt like she had to handhold me. Now, would it have been great if she knew how to anticipate my needs? Yeah, absolutely. But not everybody is going to be able to do that. The chances of you running into someone who knows exactly how to support you in the moment is very low. That's why it becomes so important for us to learn how to advocate for ourselves and how to articulate our experiences, how to ask for what we need.
It's so refreshing to hear that you had that relationship that you could say, these are the things I want to prioritize. And she would respond and you would collaborate in that way. Some folks don't know how to offer help or support or guidance, and they feel like they're overstepping or they don't know if they're being offensive, which is why I started with me first. What do I need and how can I articulate this in a way? And then how can they also be open in a way to be able to offer that?
For the people who know me for my support community on Facebook, we have neurodivergent people from around the world. Even though the legislation is different, the culture is different and stuff, the challenges largely remain the same. It's this cycle of burnout that really gets us. I don't know about you, but, through my 10-year marketing career, I burnt out I forget what the number is, at least 5 or 6 times. And it's not that I wasn't good at what I do, but the thing is my energy isn't consistent every single day like everybody expects us to be. And honestly, whoever told me that life is one thing after another was lying. It's all the things all at the same time.
And I'm very glad to be in your Facebook group. I post and comments, and sometimes I'm like, wait, literally relate as if I could have written that. There was a post about how we say, "How are you?" in the workplace. And I'm like, well, can I tell them how I honestly am doing, or is that just a formality?
One other thing that I know that we really wanted to chat about is intersectional identities, because neurodivergence doesn't happen in a vacuum. I don't talk about work as if work is the only thing in your life. We always need to talk about all the other aspects that are affecting it outside of work. It is very similar when it comes to talking about intersectionality as it relates to neurodivergence, because not all neurodivergent experiences are the same. And it's really important to identify what the impact of your other identities are. For example, if you are a queer person, if you are a person of color, if you are a physically disabled person on top of being neurodivergent, that is a very common thing, by the way. I mean, I know that you said that you are Filipino American. You also identify as a queer person. I myself am incognito queer and a Chinese Canadian person. So I feel like we've got the East Asian people kind of represented a little bit here. How do you feel those other identities kind of impacted your experience as a professional and now in your adult life?
In my first master's, I quoted Kimberly Crenshaw a lot of how intersecting identities affect the ways that we're perceived, the ways that we may present to the world. And things to note too is some parts of our identities are more visible. On the outside, folks can see that I present as an Asian American woman, but I've also let folks know that sometimes those stereotypes and judgments get in the way. And that's where that trauma-informed approach comes from, because I recognize those are also important in my neurodivergence, that not only am I managing day-to-day symptoms, but also past trauma or past experiences that I may have had to process. Growing up a Filipino-American child of immigrants in North America, I fit that stereotype of, oh, good at math, good at this, good at everything, high achieving student. And so I definitely held on to that of, well, my parents expect a lot of me, society expects a lot of me, I am going to be that quote unquote smart student. Especially also coming from that Filipino culture and background where I wanted to give back to my parents and give back to my culture of them coming here. And I'm the eldest child of
eldest daughter syndrome.
Yeah, so
here we are like the eldest daughter. Sorry to cut you off, I just had to shout that out.
No need to apologize, because I hope folks listening in realize that plays into it too. I was the example of first to go to undergrad, first to go to grad school, and also I was the caretaker, I was the person providing responsibility. So I'm curious about other neurodivergent folks. Were you also the person still expected to take care of others when there are maybe days you couldn't take care of yourselves?
Most of the questions I get as a career coach is, should I apply for this job? Should I go into this line of work? Should I disclose my my diagnosis to my manager? Should I ask for accommodations? And everyone gets pissed at me when I say it depends, because that's not the answer we want. We want an actual answer. But the thing is, it's going to depend on who are the people involved. How safe do you feel with them? What are the policies that might be protecting you on an organizational standpoint? Even on a legal level, like what are the legislations in your state, in your province? Being able to assess the situation and determine what are the chances that if I take this action, it will not backfire on me, or what will the potential repercussions be? And being able to make those calculated risks is very, very important. This can be very difficult for people who consider themselves to be risk adverse. And a lot of neurodivergent people are, because we've been told over and over again when we put ourselves out there, or when we show our authentic selves, or if we try something new, we're often shut down and told, hey, that's weird, or hey, don't do that, or hey, that's not what's expected, and so you shouldn't do that. So a lot of us get really scared to kind of take those risks and put ourselves out there. But unfortunately, that is a very, very necessary part of the way that our work culture works. People aren't hiring based off of how qualified qualified you are. They tell you that they are. They're actually hiring you based off of the feeling and the vibe that they get from you and the confidence that they feel. Now, some of that might be rooted in your experience. Some of that might be rooted in your skill set. But a lot of it has to do with how comfortable you make them, with how excited they are to meet you, how easy they think that you're going to make their life. And a lot of those things don't necessarily come from what you say. It comes from how you deliver it or how you present yourself with your body language. I was talking with one of my friends who is from Taiwan, and she comes here and she is struggling with interviews because in Taiwanese culture, you don't talk about your accomplishments. You let them speak for themselves. That is so opposite from how we are expected to sell ourselves in North American culture and pitch ourselves. Luckily for me, I was really good at kind of masking that. I was a theater kid growing up, so I was like, this is improv. Like, I'm just doing an improv scene. But not everybody has that background. So while that was an advantage for me, it is a barrier for a lot of neurodivergent folks there.
You relate to also being in music and dancing and theater. The unwritten rule is it's not always, well, what makes you qualified? It's the energy, the vibe, the fit. And that's why I disagree so much when it's like, okay, you weren't accepted because fit and culture. And I'm like, and that's why I tell a lot of my students and clients when they don't get the internship or job they wanted, it is exhausting to constantly be hyper aware, hyper vigilant. Am I saying or doing the right thing? If I bring this up, if I apply here, if I go for this.
Can you imagine if we all went to work and we had managers or employers who would be able to do little things like, how are you feeling today before we get started? What is your energy feeling like? Are you low energy? If so, maybe we can keep this meeting a little bit more succinct. Like, these are all such tiny, tiny little things that would make a world of difference. That would make so many of us feel so seen and so accepted, because suddenly our body's reactions and our brain's reactions are not an inconvenience. It is just something that happens. It is innately human. And
so I actually practice that with my leadership. For example, I'd say, hey, do you need a break or do you need to breathe? I've asked leadership, well, how's your energy? Not even like, oh, what did you get done today? Is, well, how are you feeling? And so I've been comfortable to model that for them. I've seen that repeated, even our students do too, where like, hey, did you eat or did you take a walk? Or they know sometimes I'll take my meetings on the floor. Sometimes some of us work in the dark. I have one colleague where never wants the lights on, and so we make sure that he's comfortable and feeling okay where he is. And we don't need to explain if it's because of like a mental or physical thing. It's okay. This person needs a break or this person wants to go here.
You mentioned that you are a child of immigrants. So am I. And you talked earlier about how there's this idea that they came to this new country so that they could provide a better life for their kids. And then their kids are left with the feeling of, well, if I don't succeed by their standards, I am going to make all of their sacrifices for nothing. And I got to tell you, I love my parents, but I also recognize how hard it's been on them to live that way. I'm pretty sure I grew up in a fully neurodivergent household. I mean, it's not like my parents are diagnosed or anything, but me and my sibling got it from somewhere. I'm seeing now in their later years the toll it's taken on not just on their mind, but on their bodies. Parents who are older than mine who are off like skiing and traveling the world, and my parents are dealing with like a lot of chronic illnesses, physical limitations, their brain fog. But it just so goes to show that we are doing the work to try and break these generational practices and to try and create the conditions so that the next generation of neurodivergent people and people in general will be able to better advocate for themselves.
I feel that so deeply. I'm just like taking that in right now. You know, I love my parents and my family too, and that's where a lot of the trauma comes from. Let's be real, that a lot of that work was in therapy. And another thing I wanted to mention is growing up, when I first received the OCD diagnosis, what is that? Like, what is, having to explain that to them. And, I want to acknowledge maybe some folks listening to this, maybe they may or may not be no contact, or maybe have different loved ones, or, people have different situations where I know even with my friends, some of them are close to family or guardians or loved ones, or maybe some of them are a little bit more separate, and wanting to validate that that's all okay depending on your situation and what works best for you and protecting yourself. And I know with me, with breaking the cycles, and emotions are valid, right? I may get emotional saying this. I remember one of my biggest arguments with my mother's, you don't understand my OCD and what it's like to have this brain, and I hated it. My symptoms started showing in fourth grade. And I remember one day I had come home and she had printed out 50 pages of what OCD is. And I just remember, oh my gosh, she is trying. And I remember, and I remember that still very fondly, and how my parents too.
Oh my God, Kirby, this has been such a great conversation. I think we've covered so many important topics. Kirby is a trauma-informed coach, somatic healing practitioner with lived experience as a neurodivergent person. I myself am available if anybody is interested in career coaching, and I have a lot of great workshops and offers coming up soon. Is there anything else you wanted to share before we wrap up?
I'm so grateful that you provided the space to be able to talk, and thank you for what you do too. I know that after this conversation, I'm going to do my own processing and taking it in, and feeling that gratitude. So thank you so much as well.
Absolutely. The pleasure is mine. So that's another episode wrapped of Work is Rigged. Stay tuned and definitely subscribe or follow us to make sure that you don't miss the next episode. And we'll see you the next time.